Hail, fellows and foresters. Sister Emma here to share with you more knowledge and lore of medieval beasts and the wild spaces they inhabit. I was recently honored to receive a token from His Royal Majesty Emerson, King Consort of the East Kingdom. As His Majesty's badge includes a bee skep, I find it so fitting that his token is a wee little bee charm. Of course, this immediately turned my mind to bees, which is one of my favorite creatures to speak of from a medieval perspective. You see, although the people of history were closely bound to the natural world and very observant of it, nonetheless, they believed that bees were not insects, but were in fact the smallest of birds.
I think nothing illustrates this belief better than this illustration found in the Ashmole Bestiary produced in the early 13th century in England. Let's paint these weird little cuties while I tell you more about bees. Dating back to the time of Aristotle and Pliny the Elder was the gruesome belief that bees generated spontaneously from the rotten flesh of oxen. The rotten flesh would turn into maggots or worms, and those maggots would grow to become bees. Gross. Thankfully, the other, more romantic way that bee offspring were created was for grown bees to gather their offspring in their mouths from the surface of leaves and from sweet herbs. Much better. Thomas of Cantimpré in the 11th century observed that bees laid eggs in the cells of the hives and incubated and hatched their young from there. But the belief that some bees sprung to life from rotting flesh did continue into the 12th century. Ancient and medieval naturalists observed the way that honeybees, or hive bees, lived as a community. Writers across time have admired how bees work hard and share resources. They distinguished that bees had schedules of activity, various roles within the colony, and even how they disposed of their waste and of their dead. They knew that bees reacted aggressively to loud noise, but were calmed by smoke. These are all things we still understand about bees today. Two manuscripts in particular contain illuminations depicting a person playing a drum-like instrument next to a beehive. One is the Bestiary.ca, produced in 1285, and the other is a derivative work by an anonymous author created sometime later. The Bestiary.ca explains the illumination thus: bees cannot hear, they are deaf. But bees can be led by whistles and songs. They cannot hear the music, but they follow it because music is of the highest order, and bees, being orderly, respect order. Did you follow that? I know of no other source that makes these claims or that depicts musicians adjacent to a beehive. Most of the illuminations of humans next to beehives are of capturing bees or being attacked by bees. We can't talk about bees without mentioning the queen. But in medieval times, the queen was thought to actually be a king or an emperor. I mean, of course they thought that. Let's all collectively roll our eyes at the patriarchy and move on. Let me read you what Bartholomeus Anglicus wrote about the king of bees in the 13th century. Bees make among them a king, and ordain among them common people. And though they be put and set under a king, yet they be free and love their king, that they make by kind love, and defend him with full great defense, and hold honor and worship to perish, and be spilt for their king. And do their king so great worship, that none of them dare go out of their house, nor to get meat, except the king pass out, and take the principality of flight. And bees choose to their king him that is most worthy and noble in heightness and fairness, and most clear in mildness. For that is the chief virtue in a king. For though their king have a sting, yet he useth it not in wreak. I love that last line. Though their king have a sting, he useth it not in wreak. Wreak being anger or vengeance or to do harm. I've also looked up the definition of the term heightness, and it appears to reference adornment and embellishment. So this Englishman of the 13th century, writing about bees, believed that the chief virtue in a king was mildness, which is secondary to their carriage and their presentation. What a fitting thing that His Majesty Emerson employs the imagery of bees in his persona. And there we go. My wee little bee friends are finished, and I'll set this piece aside to dry. Hold your horses. I have some sources. I have to give a lot of credit to Bestiary.ca. This site is a personal project of a scholar and fellow Canadian and is my launching point for most of my content on the beasts of the Middle Ages. This resource allows me to find published texts from period, modern texts on the subject of medieval beasts, and of course the illuminated manuscripts that depict the beasts I talk about. I have named all referenced bestiaries throughout this video, and I'll link to them in the video description. Thank you for joining me for this talk on the most endearing of small birds. It has been another great day of talking about bees. Or birds, but bees.